So yeah, it's. I was watching this, you know, Cosmic Skeptics podcast video. I used to, watch a lot of his videos about atheism and all of that. You know, and I like he gets he gives good arguments as as like playing the devil's advocate or something. So yeah, we'll do this one. He has Earthling Ed, and it's Veganism Reconsidered. I was watching it and I kind of wanted to, just like there's always some sort of you know like a problem when it comes to how do you define a vegan and what it actually entails and blah blah blah. So yeah, we'll do that. But first, let's just get to this. Like in on my previous video, which is inconsistent anti-natalist, and let's just read the comments that we got. So yeah, this guy. Let's see. This is this guy, Steve Godfrey. Yeah. So I mean, this is he he watched my video and he commented, and I know a history about this guy. He he sort of like argues with Mendham on comments and on videos and blah blah blah, and he doesn't have a counter argument as evidenced right here. So yeah, let's read some of this crap. So he says at 9:30, you you are wrong. So let's go to 9:30 and let's see what we actually said. Okay, we'll go with yeah, 20. Are going to suffer and die, and why does it need to be prolonged? That's the question, and there's no logical answer to that. Life doesn't need to exist, and this is like, I mean, this is the inconsistency with these antenatal. So this is what I said at 9:30, that there's no logical and rational response. And he says you are wrong. There are logical and rational responses to everything you say. Okay, present one. And I mean, come on, like, quit pretending. There is none. Get real. You're just addicted. This is a common error with atheists. What can I say? Okay, that's what you think. It's from Gary's misuse of words, logic, and rational. Gary's misuse. I mean, this guy is just like, I think he has some sort of, you know, some sort of. I don't like Gary, or I'm. It's just so stupid. This is your argument, man. Atheists conflate disagreeable intuitions slash values with being illogical or irrational. No, listen. You can disagree with me, but you're still going to be wrong. You can disagree with me that 2 plus 2 is equals to 4. Uh, uh, and say, no, 2 plus 2 is equals to magic fairies and pixies, whatever. But you're still going to be wrong. That's a fact. Life doesn't need to exist. That's a fact. If you think it needs to continue tomorrow, you are wrong. You can disagree with me, but you're still wrong. Then he says, you say at 8:55 that given the choice of sterilization or annihilation, annihilation is the more logical choice. This isn't correct. How? Annihilation is your personal preference stemming from your intuitions. Oh, so what's your personal preference? Your personal preference is, oh, let it go on tomorrow and another year and 10 years and millions of years. And what the fuck is your argument, man? What's your argument then? You have, like I said in the description of my video, the reality gives us two options. Either we extinct, either we end life, or we let it perpetuate. What's the other option? Logic pertains to soundness and validity of arguments, and your assertions fail on both counts. Another, like, you're you just say their assertions and you can't counter argue them. How is that not the best thing? An instant death, not the best thing, best outcome for a living sentient being. How? How? When you know it's going to happen, when you know you don't know when it could happen. Uh, the only reason you say this is logic, can you say it's not logic, is to preemptively dispose of all detractors by branding them as illogical, ad hom, and poisoning the well fallacies. What? I'm saying if you disagree with this, with if you say 2 plus 2 is equals to magic, fairies, and pixies, then you are illogical. I don't care if you think I'm asserting something or I'm being not or whatever. It's just an ad hom. Like this guy saying ad hom while his whole comment is an ad hom. You didn't give me any counter argument to my logic or logic. Poisoning the. This is so stupid. In other words, you believe with absolute certainty. This is such a stupid word, absolute certainty. I'm making logical, rational argument. Do you have a counter argument? If you don't, then to be intellectually honest, you have to accept the argument rather than spew this mush. Uh, the certainty that you have insight to the ultimate, objective, unarguable truth. Oh, this is how you know, he's gonna present my position. I mean, okay, I can go with this one as well. Ultimate, objective, unarguable truth. I don't say it's unarguable. You argue the truth, okay, and objective. Yes, suffering is the only real value here. The negative experiences that sentient beings go through is of only value. Is that not an. If you can't agree with this as the basis, as you know, the unarguable truth, then you're just stupid. You're just pretending then. This means you think anyone disagreeing with you is by definition illogical and rational. It's childish. Your whole comment is childish. I mean, again, you can disagree with me. You have the choice. You can disagree with me, but you're still going to be wrong. Okay? You don't have a counter argument to the fact that, hey, life is uncertain and risky, and we don't know what could happen in the future. And, to prevent the worst, if we have to uh, annihilate the whole planet up as soon as we can to prevent the worst, because we don't know if the worst could happen tomorrow or the day after tomorrow or whatever. Then logically we have to accept, yes, we have, and also just we're going to go extinct anyways. So just this is childish. And then there was this other guy who commented, Karen and Ken Jones. The main issue is currently, as of I know, there is no way to end all life on planet Earth. I also don't think most people care much about others' suffering, just their own suffering. Yeah, I sort of agree with the other point that, yeah, this is, people don't care. But there's no way to end life on planet Earth. Well, even if I would say there are ways like killing. Yeah, that's as fast like. And this is one of the things people ask me. Oh, what do you mean by euthanizing the animal? What does that mean? You're killing. You just say I am, or humanely putting the animal, humanely killing the animal. Like these vegans say, how do you humanely kill an animal who doesn't want to die? Yeah, simple, as close to instantaneous as you can. Simple, simple. Better would be the best would be to just uh, the animal goes to sleep and just doesn't wake up. That's the best. But like saying that, how do we end life? These there are we have technology, and even if we don't have it yet, why shouldn't we work towards uh, you know uh, sort of like a big bomb or something for the end days to blow the planet up, and that will end life on planet Earth. So yeah, it's just very you know depressing when you see people making these stupid arguments. It's like so if we can if, but still you have to logically recognize that yeah, blowing up the planet is the best thing that we can do. That is the best thing we can do as as uh, as beings who can recognize that oh yeah, the future will exist and this shit could happen, and if I prevent the worst, then I win. And there's nothing being lost here. There aren't no Martians saying, "Oh, I want to live. Oh, please don't kill me." Whatever that crap is. So yeah, let's get on with this. Now.
Is, in your view, to be clear with our terms, what veganism is, what it is that you're actually advocating people do, I guess like a definitional starting point. So, yeah, welcome back, and I guess the first question is, what is veganism?
Yeah, I mean, it's a simple question, but also a relatively complex question, I suppose, in terms of the context of how we live. Veganism, I guess the formal definition, um,
How we live. Why do we need to live?
is to live in a way that excludes, as far as is possible and practicable, the exploitation and use of animals. Not
To live in a way. I mean, why do we need to live? I understand. Yeah, if you're going to live, then yeah, this is better to reduce suffering. But the big picture is why do we need to live? Why? What are we going to do here? What is there to do here? Nothing. Except for making a mess and cleaning up a mess. And I would argue that logically, hey, logic again, that it's far more logical, it's better. A rational being can understand this. It's not just my intuition or something. I'm making the logical argument that not making up the mess in the first place is more logical than making up the mess and cleaning up 90% of it or even 100% of it. There's no need to make the mess. But yeah, let's just move it.
human animals. So I suppose in tangible terms, that means eliminating some of the primary aspects of, for which we exploit animals. So meat, dairy, eggs, of course, clothing like leather, wool, down, fur, and then obviously avoiding cosmetics tests on animals. And those are kind of like the broader.
Oh, like, this is the. Come on, get this one real. Like, if you're gonna be too silly that you're going to pay for unnecessary torture, I mean, stop paying for it.
More obvious ones. But the definition, I suppose, you use that word specificity, which is a bit of a mouthful, right? And that's part of the interesting, I guess, nuance of this conversation. I know that maybe you had a couple of questions that we were going to dive into, kind of more catered around that, but I think that there is this nuance which exists, and to kind of go off on a really random tangent straight off the bat, a lot of things that people always say to me, you know, they'll say similar things, and one of the things that I always hear from people is, you know, I suppose, like, why do we have to be vegan? Like, what is this reason to be vegan now? And it comes down to that notion of choice. And so this is no.
Don't be a hypocrite. I mean, this is it's that simple. Like, if you're going to pet your dog or your cat and, you know, whatever, and say you care about it and you wouldn't want it to suffer, why would you pay for suffering of cows and chickens and everything, the animals being experimented on in these health sector of human beings? This, oh, we have to be healthy and live long and all this other crap. It's all, you shouldn't be voting for it. This is and you recognize your hypocrisy, that it's you're you're saying, oh, I don't want this animal to be hurt because it's, you know, I have, like, you can say that I have an attachment with it, that's why it's more important. But let's just make a, you know, a logical, you know, thought experiment that would make you think otherwise, in the sense that some people have attachment to their stuffed animals, right? So would you say that if I cut the throat of the stuffed animal, and if I cut the throat of your cat or your dog, would you say that those two events were the same thing? I mean, come on. It's not about the attachment. It's not just about that. It's about recognizing that the animal has a brain, it feels pain, it can feel it, and in this sense it feels more pain. And you can recognize it when it's being tortured, because you're a rational, conscious being who can say, hey, if you hit the cat, then it's, hey, don't do that. But if you're going to pay for slaughter of other animals, that's just idiotic. It's bullshit.
The notion of reducing as far as possible and practicable, I suppose, comes down to the fact that we have an option.
Yeah, this is where I just put the simple argument. Yeah, we don't need to exist tomorrow. This is so much bullshit. We are going to harm these animals. It's so fucked up. And once you recognize the whole game, that, oh, everywhere this is the same competition going on. The evolution game is going on. Some animals, like, it's a blood sport. So it's, why the fuck shouldn't it be stopped? We should put an end to all of this because it's too messy. So recognize that, yeah, extinction is the solution, but they fail to recognize that.
We haven't necessarily had in the past where we can be vegan now in a way that we weren't able to be 100 years ago, certainly not 1,000 years ago, let's say. So that
I make the simple argument: if you don't create the meat eater, you won't need to create the vegan to change the meat eater to a vegan, to convert, whatever. If you don't make the mess, you won't have to clean it up. It will always win.
that's where it becomes, I guess, a prevalent moral issue of our time, because it is now possible and it is now practicable in a way that it hasn't been before.
Yes, I think the operative word in the definition of veganism that the Vegan Society uses and that you've alluded to there is practicable or possible, as you put it also there. And one of the questions that I find most difficult to answer when talking to people about veganism is what the bounds of practicability are, because there's an interpretation which essentially says when you think of our hunter-gatherer ancestors, or you think of people living in places on the planet right now where it's genuinely impossible to get vegetables, and we think, well, because it's not practical for them to be vegan, or at least it's not practical for them to
But still, they're causing harm, right? By existing, they are. You can say, oh, they need to. They get hungry and they need to survive. But I'm saying it. It's just logically, it's just bullshit. It doesn't. The suffering weighs, the suffering that the animal will go through, is weighs more than whatever this thing we're doing. Oh, let's pretend to be somebody. It's bullshit.
remove animal products from their diet, it would be unfair to say everyone should be vegan, and to be vegan is to include something that some people
Now
can't.
you can say they have some rational need to exist, or you know, they're like a very functional person. So, but I don't think like, again, it's for nothing. It's just making a mess and cleaning up a tiny bit of it. It's so it doesn't need to perpetuate. Let's just get over life.
Can't do, right?
Yeah.
But of course, there are situations in the world today where people might describe themselves as being in a position of it being quite impractical for them to go vegan, but they're not talking about needing to rely on hunting and gathering. So imagine, for example, look, if I was giving a speaking tour, and maybe I'm even giving a speaking tour about veganism,
Yeah.
and so I spend a lot of my days on the train, traveling, and a lot of the time the only place I'm able to get some food is at the train station or from a corner shop. And
Sure.
because I'm traveling for so long, it transpires that if I were to eat entirely vegan food the whole time I was on that tour, I wouldn't be able to sustain my nutritional requirements. Maybe even if I was taking a multivit, even if I brought some Huel along with me, you know.
I mean, you have to recognize that. I mean, just focusing on this little, putting your main focus on this little, oh, like what I'm doing and all of that. But we should focus on the whole game. That this is just tiny contribution in the ocean of suffering, so to speak, the which you can see what's going on planet Earth.
A situation like that, it doesn't seem like the kind of crazy, extreme type of situation that we'd usually say somebody is justified in eating a pig or a cow, but it does seem like it's perhaps worthy of a label of impractical or impracticable. I don't know what you think about a situation like that.
Well, I mean, I've been in situations. It depends. Obviously, there's degrees. Now, I've been in situations where I've done speeches, or I've been to areas where there is limited to no vegan food available, and you really are kind of scraping the barrel to find something. But by and large, it's always workable, and I've never felt that I needed to not eat something that was plant based in those moments. Now, I think we have to look at there are these degrees that we have, and so often people say to me, look, it is unrealistic to expect everyone to go vegan, and I think it's absolutely fine to admit that that's true. In fact, it's important, because the last thing we want to seem is dogmatic or ideologically naive. And
I mean, this is needs to get done. The need is there to fix this mess, to clean it up, to end it, to prevent it soon.
I would say that for a significant number of people in the world, there isn't the options that we have, and you can maybe even make the argument that, I don't know if I could say majority, but there's definitely a significant number of people where it's not possible. And I think what the roadblock we run into sometimes is people can be disingenuous, and they can apply that knowledge of it not being possible for everyone, and then apply it to themselves as a way of trying to detract from their own personal responsibility. And so what I mean by that is
That's right. But there's a question which I briefly mentioned to you at one point.
Fuck.
Before, I think I messaged you about it, and I wonder if you have any thoughts on this. And that is the question of eating non-essential vegan food, because
Yeah, this is I like his, the way he's gonna present the
as
argument.
anybody who's kind of had a bit of familiarity with the vegan discussion will be aware, animals are killed in crop production. Right? Like, vegans are responsible for killing animals too.
Sure.
And when somebody brings this up as a problem, you have a whole...
Yeah, and those animals are they they've been imposed by our, not recognizing that this thing that's going on planet Earth, it's pointless and it's causing unnecessary suffering and it should be offed. And so they're being imposed by our, I don't know what, just, let's live. So I'll just have to separate our psychologies from, the philosophy as a, like, you can have a psychological need and, oh, I want to live and do this and that, but once you start recognizing the reality and the the blood that's everywhere, you'll start to recognize and empathize with the beings who are being tortured by even you just buying potatoes. There are rodents. All of this, it's too messy. Let's not play with it.
video on this, the big question that vegans can't answer, something like this. The answer is to say, well, look, I mean, far less crops are used to feed a human being than are used to feed livestock. And so if we eat the crops directly, then we kill less animals in crop production. But if animals die in plant-based agriculture to produce things like vegan chocolate, vegan cakes, that is non-essential vegan food, then by eating those products, we are buying food that directly contributes towards the death and suffering of animals that we don't
Obviously.
need to be doing. So it seems to me like there we are contributing unnecessarily to the suffering and death of animals, which doesn't seem like a very vegan thing to do.
Yeah. Well, it's an overconsumption issue, isn't it? And I think that whether it's foods, clothing, whatever it may be, we have an issue, broadly speaking, in society where we consume too much of.
Why do we need to consume? Like, this is the thing, right here. Consumption, reproduction, addiction, parasitism. This is just the whole game that all these beings are stuck in. Just consume. Why? It's recognized as like, oh, let's just look at Earth from above and see, oh, what is going on here? Come on.
Of most things, right? And so when it comes to this idea of, what is not essential, I guess firstly it's quite hard to determine what is essential. Now, we could take essential as just meaning, 2,500 calories a day, making sure you hit your nutrient allowance, and then you could make the argument, well, if I've hit my nutrient allowance or my nutrient goals with 2,000 calories, well, I've got 500 calories spare, having a piece of chocolate cake or whatever it may be could be classified as essential because I need those extra calories. So right, I don't think it seemed maybe that the line you were drawing was between.
It's you can just live on bread and water. I personally say, even if it takes like 20, 30 years out of your life, it's just like, what, it's the torture is, there's nothing we're doing that is worth that torture. Nothing.
Between like healthy and unhealthy, and you're using like unhealthy as being non-essential. But unhealthy doesn't have
It's
to.
just like we are projecting it from ourselves. Oh, I need to live. It's not rational.
Be non-essential. A lot of people rely on unhealthy foods to meet their caloric intake. So I think it's just more about an overconsumption issue, and we shouldn't be consuming above and beyond what we need, because then we have health problems as well, and that obviously brings about a huge.
I mean, they just want to live life. At the end of the day, it's all the problems are you know being like left out because they're not paying attention to the main problems because they all just want to live. They're all going to die.
Problem to society and to individual health. So I think it's just more about being responsible and not over-consuming what we should be consuming anyway, and that would somewhat alleviate that problem.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
We could potentially draw out a more specific answer by looking at a problem case. Like
Sure.
we have a situation in which a person has a choice for whatever reason, to either eat, and if one product doesn't do it, let's say they have to do it every day for the whole week or something, they're eating vegan food, and they know that a certain number of animals are being killed in crop production in order to produce that food,
Right.
and it's probably like a few, it's not just like one, right? But they do have the opportunity, because of where they live, to maybe go hunting, or maybe, they have a neighbor who has chickens in their back garden, this kind of thing, and so still things that we see as morally problematic if we don't need to do them, but faced with the choice between killing that one animal and eating the animal, and eating the vegan alternative, which is killing more animals in crop production. And I don't think this is always the case, of course, because in like factory farming, far more crops are used.
Yeah.
But if a person were in a situation where they eat a bit of chicken, or a bit of steak, or a bit of elk, or whatever, and it kills less animals than eating a vegan alternative that kills more animals in crop production, what's the correct thing to do? And I guess separately, what's the vegan thing to do? And
I would say if it causes if the vegan alternative causes more suffering, then yeah, and there's no other choice. If there's no other choice, these are the only two options. Then yeah, you eat the chicken. Poor bird.
are they the same thing?
Well, I mean, to kind of just go briefly back to the original question we were discussing, I think that the benefit of supporting plant-based agriculture now is we're demanding that plant-based agriculture become more efficient, become more ethical. When we look at things like vertical farming or kind of more,
It's just like our selfish, mm, mm, you know, ego saying we human beings need to exist. Let's just make this and that, and don't
regenerative
make the
systems of
mess. Don't
plant-based
please. You
agriculture that
won't
are
have to clean
focused,
it up.
less on efficiency of production, but more on sustainability and morality of production.
Growth can't be sustainable. It just won't work.
I think that those advancements will be driven from this demand for these plant-based foods, and I think that the risk we have is by, I guess, normalize the consumption of animal products, we are less likely to pursue a more preferable system of plant-based production. There was a paper actually on crop deaths, and Joe Rogan cited it. In that video you referenced of mine, I speak about this paper. And the paper basically starts by saying that they estimate about 7.2 billion animals are killed in crop production annually.
7.2 billion animals are killed for crops to. I mean, this is just the numbers.
But the conclusion of the paper is that actually in the future it should be possible to produce plants without killing any animals through things like vertical farming systems. And so I think what we should be doing is supporting plant-based agriculture.
They're like, yeah, the future should exist and this should happen there.
With an eye to the future, wherein that future
That's what I think
which we
about
can
it.
create would be a future that is focused on reducing crop deaths as well, because hopefully as we move more into a vegan society, we will look to produce plants in a way that is more in harmony with the morality and beliefs around veganism. But I don't want to dodge your question. To come back to the question that you're alluding to, let's say with backyard eggs, for example. There is probably a situation where you can justify consuming backyard eggs and not have too much of a moral problem with that. But with this specific thing we're talking about, those hens will be fed something, and they'll be fed chicken feed, which is, of course, something that's grown and harvested. The same problems exist.
Yes.
But with the hunting one, I think what's interesting there is, I suppose there's a couple of ways of looking at it. The first is when we talk about food systems, I suppose the word system heavily implies a form of production that can feed the masses. Hunting obviously can't. So if we separate hunting into kind of individual, I guess, damage, but then societal harm as well. From a societal perspective, the notion of hunting being a food system obviously doesn't work. We can't feed everyone with a system of hunting, because if you want to do canned hunting, which is where they
Why do you want to? Why do you want to continue the hunger in the future? Why does hunger need to exist in the universe? It's just
breed animals in these kind of contained zones. That doesn't work because you're still feeding them something. But even with kind of truly wild animals, let's look at the US. There's 30 million deer, 360 million people thereabouts. So you can't feed everyone with a hunting system, and actually the ecological damage of doing so would be catastrophic. So that doesn't work. So we still should be preferring a plant-based food system, or on kind of lending more credibility, I suppose, and validity to a plant-based food system. But I suppose from an individual perspective, what becomes interesting to me is the hunting argument, or I guess the moral aspect of the hunting argument, often comes down to things like, what we're talking about now with crop production deaths, but also I suppose the idea that there is too many deer or too many of moose or elk, and it's actually morally preferable to hunt them because it reduces the risk of starvation and reduces the risk of dying from a horrible disease, which obviously happens to wild animals.
I mean, yes, the wild. This is like where I see inconsistency with the in the wild. It's wild, okay, it's fucked, and I can there are better ways to extinct the wild population, but if you have a choice of giving an animal a instant death or letting it subject to the risk of being and inevitably dying of something else, it's and for what, just to live longer? For why does it need to live longer? It's so stupid.
I guess the main problem with that is hunters are killing animals in their prime. In nature there is kind of like a system of checks and balances where
Checks and
the weaker
nature, and this is a pretty
the older animals are the ones who are taken by the predators, because they don't have the legs to be able to run as fast as they used to be able to. They don't have the stamina to be able to.
Yeah, so it doesn't mean that for that it's if only those were being if only those beings are being tortured, then yeah, it's okay as long as the healthy ones aren't being tortured.
To evade danger. And so I think
And it's not even about torture, it's about there's a difference. You have to recognize how will the wild animal kill the whatever's the weak animals or the strong animals, whatever, and how will the hunter kill. I mean, I'm not for hunting, it's stupid, but it's like because of what because they don't basically want to, they're not actually trying to end this blight of of animals torturing each other. No, they're just using it for their selfish bullshit that, oh, let them breed, let them also that we can live longer and hunt them and eat them, and it just because we get off on it, and let's just keep this going on. No, that's bullshit.
the moral argument, I think, only has credibility when you have hunters who are specifically looking for weak animals or ill animals or very old animals, and looking to kind of like, I suppose, hunt in that way. But that's not the situation we have. These are very healthy animals, the big stags with the big antlers. And so, actually, that is robbing an animal of a life which...
Robbing an animal of a life. Again, this is right back to the same. You either go to pro-life or you go to pro-mortalism. This is, it doesn't need to, just because you have this delusion that, oh, if I am dead in a millisecond, then I was harmed, because I didn't get to live or something, because you have a brain and it's conscious, and you have this delusion because of that. You're gonna presume that the animal should have that same. Oh, don't rob the life of the animal. This is just.
From a natural perspective, would be much longer than it would have been if they had been hunted. So I think that's potentially when one of the moral aspects of hunting becomes slightly tenuous, is the argumentation that's used, I don't think actually plays out in the actions they partake in.
It's like a reverse natural selection. Instead of the survival of the fittest, it's the exact opposite. It's survival of the weakest, because hunters are picking off the strong and well suited.
It doesn't. This whole thing doesn't need to
I mean,
exist.
what's fascinating is they've seen in certain species of wild animals that genetic traits have gone in the opposite direction. What I guess a kind of utilitarian perspective would say that was the preferable thing to do. But I guess I'm not sure where that situation necessarily exists. Even with the case of hunting, you kill one elk, hunters will make the claim, well, that elk feeds me for a year, and then that may well be true, but it's also not the only food you're consuming.
Yes.
So I guess theoretically, if being a carnivore was this healthy, amazing thing to do, and killing one elk fed you for an entire year, well maybe there's some argument there, but that's just not the reality that we live in. So I can't think of a tangible example which necessarily subscribes to what you were asking.
Yes.
Do you have any?
I don't have any that I would confidently say.
Yeah.
I know that this results in less suffering. I think the reason why it's useful to talk about it is because a lot of the time people make an argument that there's some particular form of vegan action that actually kills more animals. Eating plants kills more animals, this kind of thing. And there are two discussions to have about that. The first is to say, like, yes, it does, or no, it doesn't. The second is to say, well, if it does or if it doesn't, does that matter in terms of what our practice should be? It seems to me that, I would agree with you that in the vast majority of cases, at least, it is actually the case that being a vegan is going to harm less animals. That's kind of our thing.
Sure, yeah.
But I would quite trivially, in my view, accept the conditional that if a particular action results in less animal suffering and death, that is just going to be the right course to take. And so I agree with you that it seems like you're implying that maybe you agree with me there that conditionally it would be the case if it caused more animal suffering, that would be the wrong thing to do. But because that never materializes, it kind of doesn't matter.
Well, I think it would be strange to say that the reason we're vegan is to reduce animal suffering, but then take the approach that abiding by, I suppose, a definition or a concept of what being a vegan means more generically. I don't think that should be more important than actually abiding by the philosophy of reducing suffering.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Because then we're using veganism as an identity, and we're saying that identity is more, important than the actual philosophy behind it. So I think theoretically, yes, there is an argument that could be made there, which it feels weird to say, but we do live in an imperfect world, and so even with most moral discussions, there are nuances and situations that don't neatly fit into where we'd like them to fit. So I guess theoretically what you're saying is probably true, but of course in real terms we would agree that the vast majority of cases, at least the ones that we partake in every single day, the choices that we have, it's relatively clear cut what does cause or reduce suffering the most. I think one thing I think is interesting actually, and one thing I think we need more transparency over with food in general, is the production of food. And I guess what I mean by that is there are obviously some foods, plant foods, that are going to cause more suffering than others. Take iceberg lettuce, for example. Iceberg lettuce has next to no calories. Nutritionally is rubbish. So what's the benefit of eating iceberg lettuce? Because if animals are dying in the production of iceberg lettuce, but it also offers us as humans basically nothing, even from a flavour perspective. I mean, it doesn't offer anything.
I mean, then you can make the argument that eating iceberg lettuce is not vegan.
Morally, why would we
This
produce
is
that?
this is where this is where I say the simple solution wins. If you don't create the meat eater, the need machines, the the beings crawling and doing all this. We have to compete and win. You don't create all of that. You won't have to worry about fixing it, and you can only stop it now by extincting it. So yeah, I think we'll do part 2 of this one.